All right. Hello, everyone. So it's just me this week. Marcello is off doing who knows what. He's actually practicing or training for our 800-kilometer ride that's coming up. So it's just me this week, and I wanted to just resurface a presentation that I did back for DesignTO in January 2020 before the world got really weird. And this talk is called Our Future in the Intangible. It's about design and commoditization and technology. And this was back in 2020 when AI was making weird looking cats on Google. We were pretty far away from where we were today. And it was for a series that DesignTO put out around the future of work or a future without work. So I'm excited to rehash this by popular demand, and let's see. I'm going to dust it off. Might be a little bit rusty, but let's dive in. All right, our future in the intangible, embracing commoditization. Very weird to say that. As you know, we are Tennis. We're a B2B web design and product development agency. So enough about that. A little bit about how design has evolved. So when I started design, it was 2006. I was just starting off at OCAD. Things were very different back in the day. I started in graphic design, and at that point, the design domain was editorial, branding, motion, wayfinding. It was really contained. It wasn't complicated. We called digital interaction design. So the terms user experience hadn't even really come around yet. As things progressed in my discipline and my education, I got introduced to industrial design. So my scope of design expanded much more. I got introduced to people like Alex Manu at OCAD and this idea of innovation consulting, foresight, healthcare design, service design, product design. And again, still, we weren't talking about user experience at that point. Still industrial design. That terminology hadn't come around yet. But healthcare, human factors, service design, systems, that was all part of this intangible part of design that I was pretty excited about after exploring graphic design. And then I got introduced to human computer interaction, HCI for short, and design got a lot more research focused. We started exploring data visualization, cognitive science, design research, visual analytics. So again, the domain expanded once again. And while this is all happening to me at OCAD, it's also happening outside in the real world. We have agencies like IDEO establishing design research methodologies and trying to get business people to speak design and design people to speak business. It was a very fascinating time to be going to school and having all of this come into our education. As I got closer to graduation and as we got closer to just starting what at the time was going to be Tennis, we got introduced to a lot of business methodologies. So business modeling, strategy, operations, marketing technology, business intelligence. And again, design kind of co-opted all of these other mechanisms and systems. So the world of design expanded again. And then when I gave this talk back in 2020, like I had mentioned, AI was just starting to come around. UX had really got a foothold. There were boot camps popping up all over the place. New products were coming online, trying to convert sketches into fully rendered frames in Figma. So AI was coming around. The gig economy was becoming dominant. The world had changed yet again. And that was back in 2020. And it's funny as I was going back through this, just how similar things are from then to now. It feels so long ago, but not a lot has changed. So I thought that this talk was actually still pretty on point. So believe it or not, design is all that stuff. I mean, you're going to have your specialists who say, no, design is only one thing. You're going to have your generalists like myself who say design is many things. Design is very much systems oriented. And I think that this new era, the design generalist, the design engineer, is going to be thriving purely because of the way the technology has influenced that. But during the talk, I had boiled design down to these three things. This is how I had seen it at the time, working in Tennis, coming out of education, working in research labs, working with other businesses. It was really about the coalescence of technology, production, and business. And then right in the middle, you have this idea of design. And all of these things can be designed thoughtfully. But with all of those three things, each of those domains was changing drastically. At that time, and even now, it's just sped up. So at that time, design was changing in a variety of ways. Figma had really come around. Everyone was adopting Figma at that point. Sketch was slowly fading away. People were moving away from Photoshop, hopefully sooner rather than later at that point. So the tools themselves started changing. Their workflows started changing. All of the education, how it was delivered, the tools you had to use, all started changing. So with this, design became much more systems oriented, workflow oriented, kind of similar to how you would be building things through a development process. It became very much sequential, a lot less of the design, like the classic design tropes of exploration and iteration. It started to formalize itself and operationalize itself, which was interesting at that time, and that has just escalated today. From a production perspective, for like how the design work gets done and who's doing it, you actually had the gig economy coming fully online around 2020. Things like Upwork now are pretty commonplace, and countless other directories for freelancers and the gig economy to be coming into play. So businesses and agencies alike are able to action these non-traditional workers through the gig economy and just bring things online quickly, pay once, pay little, and then you're once and done and off with your work. So just the relationship around the work and employment started to evolve from a production perspective. You had businesses and agencies alike offloading some things into the gig economy as a way of cost saving. So with all of these emerging economies of nearshore, things happening in Central, South America, these economies started coming online. At the time, I was hearing about Colombia doing substantial investments in their tech industry to make Colombia a viable country for digital nomads. And it worked. We look back this day, back in 2020, that was just an idea. In 2026, that's full blown. Like Colombia is a big central hotspot for digital nomads. Mexico City as well. Peru, all of these places in Latin America have come online. So again, businesses and agencies alike have offices there. They have development agencies there. They're acquiring firms and people and building teams there. So this whole nearshore thing, again, drove the cost of the production further and further down. The technology side of things also was changing rapidly at that time. We had the evolution of no code and low code. Nearshore, again, people nearshoring development in Latin America largely was big for technology because it meant that you weren't standing up large scale development teams, especially with no code and low code, because it just got so much easier to do internally as a business, as an agency. You had things like Webflow, Squarespace coming online, and Webflow to this day has been a huge efficiency boost to a lot of agencies. They have their own partner economy that's evolved. Now, sure, a lot of people are talking about moving off of Webflow and letting Claude code, Vibe code them some websites, and it's all complicated. We won't get into that today, but just know like low code and no code completely changed the landscape of technology and how we deploy technology within design. So there's all of these things happening, but while that's happening, we have business also evolving. You have the new methodologies coming into play, this idea of digital transformation. Everyone wants these new technologies either in-house or the agencies to be using these new technologies. Maybe sounds kind of familiar to where we are with AI right now. Customer experience started becoming crucial as a differentiator for businesses. So while all of these changes in design, production, and workflows are happening, businesses are looking at this and asking, well, how do we get an agency to evolve who we are as a business and how we operate as a business? It's a pretty big ask. All of this to say that one thing I keep coming back to, it's this quote from John Beda. I don't even know if this quote still stands today. It's complicated. It's complicated for me to reiterate this, but the temple of design does not rule this century. And I think before AI, I would have fully agreed with this. I would have said, yeah, actually, technology fully is the default standard for this century. And it is like if we look at what AI is doing to our industry, I think that that still kind of holds true. Technology rules our century. But I think where I'm conflicted with this statement now, whereas then I wasn't, is that AI is just it's flattened the playing field so much. It's driven the level of effort down so significantly for so many things and so many disciplines that I start to wonder about differentiation. And that differentiation, I do think, comes back to not just how the design work gets done, but what the actual design work is and what is getting built. So I think technology, in this sense, maybe needs to take a backseat. We know it's there, we know it's going to drive the work of this century, but, design needs to be put on a pillar side by side with this. So, yes, let's all kind of collectively blame technology, um, blame AI, um, blame how we got here. But I think what's most fascinating for me is just this idea of osmosis. And design's always been about using tools and new technologies. We saw this happen with the shift to desktop publishing. Like we moved away from letterpress, we moved away from litho, we moved away from so many things into a world where the desktop ruled. And then desktops moved from the office to the home. Everyone was so worried about that technology allowing anyone to design. And that's great. That democratizes the work. It also can commoditize the work. So through osmosis, technology, the tooling, the workflows, this idea of work sequencing comes into our field, into our practice, just by virtue of the tools that we're using. And I like to think of Ford and Toyota. Bit of a weird reference, but Ford democratized access to a vehicle. He created the assembly line that we know today. Toyota further optimized that, and they have optimized it so substantially that like every little aspect and detail of the workflow is thought of. So for Toyota, the differentiator is just the process for how things get built and distributed. People buy Toyota because they're fans of Toyota, but a really big Toyota fan actually thinks of Toyota from a manufacturing perspective. And Ford's differentiator was the low-cost car. So this metaphor for me is interesting because the tools kind of informed the output, and that's where we are today. Like the assembly line made things easier, agencies optimized, kind of slowly stripped the soul out of the output, the thing. Where we're at now is just with design systems and AI and repeatability, like scalability. We've created these repeatable, scalable, maintainable systems to this point that we've almost removed that essence of what design was. And for all of the friction-free process that design systems brought us, it also brought us to this point where AI can action most things because of the design systems that we've meticulously built. So we almost worked ourselves into this position. And this is where the problem lies. We've commoditized design on our own in a way, and we can complain about it, but it's also a little bit on us. It's also a little bit on our tools. And when we've done that, we've driven the price down, or we've at least driven the level of effort down. And because most agencies have billed for time and materials, the price is cheaper, right? If people are billing with time and materials and a new tool makes something more effective, then you're always going to have someone other than yourself finding a more efficient way to do it. Toyota, right? They've found the efficiencies. They're not custom building a car every single time. So when price is more important than brand, that's a commodity. And that's almost what we've done with design. Not quite. We haven't broken the system yet. So don't take that as fear-mongering. But I do think it has to bring us back to this question of where is the value of design? And if the one bit of silver lining with AI right now is that it's kind of forced a lot of us to look inwards and outwards and ask this question: well, what is design anymore? Like, what was it to begin with? Who am I? If I don't have design, like, what is my role? What's my title? So it's pushed us into this big questioning phase, and I love where we're at right now because I'm seeing a lot of very interesting conversations that are cutting through the hype and the fear mongering of generative AI. So for me, I think the focus is the value of design. I think focus is going to help drive the value of design, drive the impact of businesses that you end up working with. Um, I'll be honest, that segue, like I said, and this is pretty rusty, but that segue was pretty rough. But what I think I'm trying to say here is the value of design is figuring out what you are building, why you are building it, and how you're building it, and what the essence is. So focus. And to get to that focus, we need to stop stretching ourselves thin. We need to stop adding countless additional services. And this is maybe going against my argument of specialization versus generalization. But as an agency, I do think you have to niche down in this world. You've got to figure out who you are offering your services to, where your services can have the greatest impact, because the sooner you focus on that, the more you can differentiate. So niching down is really important. I really like this quote. I think it's more related to, if you're doing too many things and you're offering too many services to too many businesses, you're going to get a lot of work, but that variation, variety, and volume of work is just going to stretch you thin. And it just runs the risk of killing your business, killing your momentum, killing your focus. So good quote. So focus, essentially. Let's get back to the fundamentals, get serious about niching down. We've done the same over the last 6 months. We actually changed our positioning from just being a digital agency to being a B2B website design and product development agency. That's still a pretty broad niche, but it tells you a lot about who we are as a business. So I think just get serious about that focus as a business or as a designer. Like, who do you serve and how do you do it and what are your tools? And how does that differentiate you from the other guy using AI? And we read this book. This is what actually spurred a lot of this presentation. It's the discipline of market leaders. That's what inspired the next 3 points that I'm about to make. And with that focus, I think that you can focus in 3 different domains as a business or as a designer. The first is operational excellence. The second is product leadership. And the third is customer intimacy. So I'll explain each of these, but I highly recommend reading that book, The Discipline of Market Leaders, because it's just really fascinating for how it frames these businesses. And you can really, once you start looking out in the real world, you start to see which businesses operate under these differentiators. So let's look at operational excellence first. So they're really not innovative. They don't care about relationships. They're looking at optimization, operationalization, systems. They want the best price and they want the most convenience for their end user. So with operational excellence, you have companies like Amazon. Amazon, I would say they don't offer anything beyond operational excellence. And if you just look at how they operate, everything comes back to this question. They're optimizing how you buy things, how you get things, getting it to you as fast as possible. You don't buy from Amazon because they have the best user experience. They actually have a pretty poor user experience. But you buy from them because it's fast, reliable, and they've really dialed in the operations of things. The next is product leadership. So product leadership, this looks at continuous innovation. They commercialize quickly. So being first to market is really critical for a product-led organization. And I'm sure you can imagine who comes to mind with product leadership. Google, for one. So Google has always led with products kind of to a fault. Like if you want to go look through historical product failures, there's a pretty funny Google product graveyard. I would have to Google it to actually find the title, but you can just Google that for yourselves and you'll find a long list of projects and products that have been sunset by Google. So they're always driving this idea of continuous innovation, commercializing quickly. That is their leadership. They lead through product innovation. And the last is customer intimacy. So for organizations like this, they actually tend to be more on the services side of things. And the reason being is that they cultivate relationships. They usually go broad and deep with their level of service because relationships are so core to how they operate. Again, they're usually a services company. So I'm actually curious who I put here. Okay, Accenture. Shout out to Accenture. And they are a huge consulting, world-renowned firm. So Accenture, if you have ever worked with them as either a vendor, employee, or client, you can probably attest to this. They do tend to cultivate relationships. It's broad, it's deep. They have a level of service that, I have heard about. I can't speak to everyone's experience, and I won't, but for this presentation, we were pretty embedded in Accenture at the time, and this was just my experience. So there you have it. Operational excellence, product leadership, customer intimacy. These are the three disciplines of market leaders. Choose one. Just choose one and focus on doing one. You can always have a little bit of a flavor of one or the other. I'm sure Google is actually good at some things, but you know what? Maybe not. I mean, it doesn't really matter. That's not their focus. They want to release fast. So with focus in play, you've chosen what discipline you are going to position yourself within to hold within the market. Now, what's next? The other big thing that evolved is inspired from what I said earlier about the whole nearshore, low code, the evolution of the job market with things like Upwork. And to explain networks a little bit, I'm going to talk about just the structure of a network. You can have these things called tightly coupled relationships. Tightly coupled relationships are like one-to-one. They're basically inseparable. That's like your classic partnership relationship. They're usually deeply embedded with one another. So you have tightly coupled relationships, and then you have loosely coupled. You have vendors who maybe call on one another every now and then. They're kind of partners in that they know how one operates. There's a level of trust there. But, removing one is not going to completely ruin the other's ability to operate, right? It's not like a manufacturer who relies solely on one provider within a tightly coupled relationship. They've got plenty of other vendors they could maybe rely on. Uncoupled is where things start to get more interesting. It's much more of a modern take. This is where you have more of a distributed relationship where you can just go out to an organization like Upwork and other services and start finding commoditized work, commoditized pricing, right? So with all of these things, with this idea of tightly coupled, uncoupled, what we start seeing with more modern relationships and the modern way that businesses and agencies like even ourselves have been set up is that you have a network effect. You actually have decentralized pieces of an organization. So you have decentralized support, decentralized SEO, like someone who is not your agency or business running your SEO. Creative technology and engineering, they're usually loosely coupled or uncoupled, right? So there's all of these different things, and businesses have started thinking more in those network controls and relationships. The benefit of which is you don't own any one of these things. You work with a marketing firm. That marketing firm is accountable to you as a client, but they're accountable to themselves as a business. So you actually don't take on much of that liability, but it does become another relationship to manage. So the network effect, it does add levels and layers of complexity, but it does allow you to optimize and even hot swap different resources out or hot swap resources in. This has been going on for a long time, and this is why I think that we're seeing leaner and leaner businesses. And it's also why we're seeing smaller businesses, smaller product teams, like a product team like Lovable. I think they're about 30 and they're in the billions of valuation. The reason for that is because they're using AI and they're using this network effect of AI that has just amplified that to be more effective as a smaller team. I think we're just going to see that principle, smaller and faster moving. That is just going to become more of the norm and it's going to start happening quicker and quicker. But so, like I said earlier, with that network effect, you actually give up a lot of control. When you don't have a marketing department, yeah, your marketing firm might be accountable to you as a client, but it's a complicated relationship, or at least it can be. It can also be tightly coupled rather than loosely coupled. So why give up that control? Well, you're trading that control in for focus, but you have to operationalize the complexity of working within this new world of networks. But with that added focus, it's going to give you so much more opportunity to focus on the right things as either a product team, an agency, or a business. So you do need to be very strategic about what you choose to keep internally and what you choose to release externally. And that's why you might hire an external design team like ourselves. It's why you might have fractional CFOs, fractional product teams. If that kind of explains a lot of what you've been seeing with the terminology. There's so many fractional service offerings these days that, you can hot swap these things with, you're trading it in for focus. So I'm just going to summarize or attempt to. Essentially, we have these three things: the design, technology, production. They have changed drastically over the last decades, but even more so over the last 6 years. So with that change, we need to start getting hyper focused on how we deliver our services and product to the market. Who are we? Are we an operationally excellent company? Are we a product leader? Or do we focus on customer intimacy? Which one? Choose one, right? So just get focused on that. Next is you need to cultivate these relationships. And this comes back to cultivating the right nodes in that network. Who are you going to work with? If you're not going to bring them internally, who are those vendors and service providers that you're going to add to your network in a loosely or uncoupled way that are going to help you grow and allow you to focus on which market lead you prefer to follow? So with that, everything is getting commoditized right now. Design, technology, so many things are turning into a commodity. But I think that commoditization cannot compete with focus. And now I don't think it can compete with taste and knowing what to build and why you're building the right thing. So that's it. Like I said, it was pretty rusty. I maybe missed a couple beats, but that was my presentation back from 2020 that I surfaced just from memory alone. So I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, we're Tennis. This is the Digital Strategy Podcast. And I hope Marcello had a great training ride today. Thanks again. Like and subscribe. Take it easy.